Hello Year 2, welcome to your English for today. It is Monday the 22nd of February 2021 and in today's English lesson we're going to be sequencing the events of a story. That means we're going to be thinking about a story and we're going to get to know it really well and think about all the things that happen from the beginning right the way through to the end. Your first job for this morning is some handwriting. Now please remember that when you are handwriting, your tummy should be near the table, not too close. Your bottoms should be to the back of your chair and your feet should be flat on the floor. Now, I have two different words on the screen for you now. If you are in the spelling bees group, then the word that I would like you to practice this morning is the word I'm. It's a contraction of the two words I and am. I am becomes I'm. And for your spellings this week, you have some other contraction rules to learn. You've looked at some before, we're going to revisit them and look at some more. Now, if you are in the wise owls group, then the word that I would like you guys to practice this morning is the word nice. And you're looking at the I, nice smile sound. So I would like you to pause the video and whichever group you are in, find your word I'm or nice and write it out nice and neatly for me 3 times. Please remember, if you're using the handwriting strip, then your letters should be in the exact same place as mine. Look at my capital I. It touches the top red line. It stands tall and proud because it's a capital letter. The other letters sit between lines 2 and 3. Make sure that yours do that too. If you're not using the handwriting lines, which is absolutely fine, and you're using some lined paper, please make sure that your writing is still lovely and neat. Here is your starter activity for this morning. Because we are looking at contractions in our spellings, I thought it would be a really nice idea for us to have a little bit of a revision of what a contraction is. Now, remember that when we're looking at a contraction, it just means a word that's been shortened. So, if you look at the first box on the screen on the left-hand side, it says Ella did not like what her dad had packed for her lunch. Now, I know that the words did and not can be contracted into a shorter form. I know that did and not can become didn't. Ella didn't like what her dad had packed for her lunch. Underneath, there are 4 sentences, and what I've done is in red, I have shown you which words I'd like you to contract, make shorter. What I would like you to do is on a whiteboard if you're in school or a bit of paper if you're at home, I would like you to rewrite those sentences. When you rewrite them, I want you to include that word or those words as a contraction. For example, the first one says, my little sister had not ever been to the seaside before. I know that the words had and not can be put together into hadn't. That's it in its contracted form, its shortened form. My little sister hadn't ever been to the seaside before. The second one, let us wear our new clothes to the party. If I contract the words let and us, they become let's. Let's wear our new clothes to the party. Now, there are 2 sentences on the screen. What I would like you to do is pause the video here, and I would like you to rewrite those sentences with the contracted form. So must not becomes, and we would becomes. Pause the video here, write down those 2 sentences as they would be in their new form, and then come back and I'll go through the answers. So pause the video now. Hopefully you've written those 2 sentences. If you've not paused, you can have some more time. The third sentence says, you must not cross the road until the green man is showing. I know that if I shorten the words must and not as a contraction, it becomes mustn't. You mustn't cross the road until the green man is showing. Now finally, the last one, we would love to come to your house for dinner. I know if I put we and would together, if I contract it, it becomes weed. We'd love to come to your house for dinner. Hopefully that was just a little refresher of those words that are contractions. If you found that tricky, that's okay, because it's still quite new to us. So well done, great effort. In today's lesson, we are going to read our new focus text, The Snail and the Whale. I know that lots of you are familiar with this story. You may have seen the short TV movie that came out a couple of Christmases ago. You may have watched it. You may remember that a few weeks ago, Miss Thompson actually shared this story with us during a story time. Now, over the next couple of weeks, we're going to use the snail and the whale in our English lessons to help us with some writing. I'm going to reread the story to you today. So make sure that you are sitting comfortably and you have your listening ears switched on so that even if you've already heard this story before, you are going to listen to it again and see if there's anything new that you learn from this story today. This is a tale of a tiny snail and a great big grey-blue humpback whale. This is a rock as black as soot, and this is a snail with an itchy foot. The sea snail slithered all over the rock and gazed at the sea and the ships in the dock. And as she gazed, she smiled and sighed. The sea is deep and the world is wide. How I long to sail, said the tiny snail. These are the other snails in the flock, who all stuck tight to the smooth black rock, and said to the snail with the itchy foot, "Be quiet, don't wriggle, sit still, stay put." But the tiny sea snail sighed and sniffed, then cried, "I've got it, I'll hitch a lift." This is the trail of the tiny snail, a silvery trail that looped and curled and said, "Lift wanted around the world." This is the whale who came one night when the tide was high and the stars were bright, a humpback whale immensely long, who sang to the snail a wonderful song of shimmering sea and coral caves and shooting stars and enormous waves. And this is the tale of the humpback whale. He held it out of the starlit sea and said to the snail, "Come sail with me." This is the sea so wild and free that carried the whale and the snail on his tail to towering icebergs and far-off lands, with fiery mountains and golden sands. These are the waves that arched and crashed, that foamed and frolicked and sprayed and splashed, the tiny snail on the tail of the whale. These are the caves beneath the waves, where stripy fish with feathery fins and sharks with hideous toothy grins swam round the whale and the snail on its tail. This is the sky, so vast and high, sometimes sunny, blue and warm, sometimes filled with a thunderstorm, with zigzag lightning flashing and frightening the tiny snail on the tail of the whale. And she gazed at the sky, the sea, the land, the waves and the caves and the golden sand. She gazed and gazed, amazed by it all, and she said to the whale, "I feel so small." But then came the day. The whale lost his way. These are the speedboats running a race, zigging and zooming all over the place, upsetting the whale with her ear-splitting roar, making him swim too close to the shore. This is the tide slipping away. And this is the whale lying beached in a bay. Quick, off the sand, back to the sea, cried the snail. I can't move on land, I'm too big, moaned the whale. The snail felt helpless and terribly small. Then, I've got it, she cried, and started to crawl. I must not fail, said the tiny snail. This is the bell on the school in the bay, ringing the children in from their play. This is the teacher holding her chalk, telling the class, sit straight, don't talk. This is the board, as black as soot. And this is the snail with the itchy foot. A snail, a snail! The teacher turns pale. Look, say the children, it's leaving a trail. This is the trail of the tiny snail, a silvery trail, saying, save the whale. These are the children running from school, fetching the fireman and digging a pool, squirting and spraying to keep the whale cool. This is the tide coming into the bay, and these are the villagers shouting hooray, as the whale and the snail travel safely away. Back to the dock and the flock on the rock, who said, how time's flown, and haven't you grown? And the whale and the snail told their wonderful tale of shimmering ice and coral caves, and shooting stars and enormous waves, and of how the snail, so small and frail, with her looping, curling, silvery tail, saved the life of the humpback whale. Then the humpback whale held out his tail, and on crawled snail after snail after snail. And they sang to the sea as they all set sail on the tail of the grey-blue humpback whale. Okay, just before we move on to our main activity, I hope you enjoyed listening to the story. There are 4 questions on the screen now that I would like you to think about. If you are in school, you can pause the video and have a discussion as a group. If you are at home, I would like you to pause the video and read the questions, and maybe if you're working with a grown-up or an adult, you can discuss them together. If you're working on your own and independently today, listen carefully to the questions because I'm going to read them to you. Number 1. Who are the main characters in the story? You don't need to write down the answers, we're just talking about them. Number 2. What happens in the story? Number 3. What do the snail and the whale see together? And number 4 says, who helps to save the whale? Pause the video here and have a little discussion about the answers to those questions. I don't want you to write them down. What I'm looking for is to see what you can remember. In today's lesson, we are using one of my friends for some help, and this is Sam Sequencer. You might remember Sam Sequencer from the autumn time when we came back to school to join year 2, and we were thinking about Sam Sequencer because he helps us to sequence the events of a story. He helps us to think about what's happened at the beginning, the middle and the end. Sam Sequencer helps us to put different events into the order that they happened in. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. We're going to look at the pictures that are on the screen now. There are 8 pictures, and we're going to put them into the order that they happened in the story. Okay, so have a little look at the pictures on the screen now. And just take a moment to think about which picture would be first. If I had to order the pictures on the screen now, which one would be the first picture? If you're able to print these pictures out from Teams, then you might want to cut them out and have them in front of you so that you could place them into some kind of order. Hopefully you've had time to cut out those pictures and get them in order. Get them in front of you. We're going to order them now. If you've not, that's totally fine. You can still join in with looking at the screen on your device and figuring out which one would come first. Okay, so we need to think, what's the first thing that happens in the story? Well, out of all those pictures, I know that the first thing that happened was that the snail wanted to travel and see the world, so he decided to leave a message on the rock, and that was the message that he's written. So that would be my first picture. So you might want to, if you've got the pictures in front of you, you might want to get that first picture and put that in front of you now. This would be the next picture. It's the picture of the humpback whale who is just sailing along on the sea, and he notices the snail and he notices the special message. This would be your third picture. And what I've done is I've grouped the 4 pictures together to show you the things that the snail and the whale see. They see those beautiful coral caves, don't they, with the fish and the sharks with the hideous grins. They see the volcanoes erupting, and they travel through those crashing waves. This would be the next picture. Something terrible starts to happen, doesn't it? There's a thunderstorm. That's what happens next. After that, they hear the speedboats racing and crashing, and that distracts the whale. He loses his way and he ends up beached on the shore. The next thing that happens is that the snail tries to help. So he slithers on down to the school and writes a message on the board to try and get the children to help. And of course we know then that the whale becomes saved, the tide comes in, and there are all the villagers in the bay shouting hooray. And finally, the end of the story. The whale and the snail travel back to the rock, and then all of the other snails climb onto his tail, and hopefully he's going to take them on an adventure to see the world too. Some of you might have decided to, as I was talking, order your pictures. If you've not decided to do that, that's actually really good, because you've got on Teams your worksheet for today. It looks like this. Okay, now what I've done is I've made it blank for anyone who can't print it out. You can just look at what the worksheet would look like, and then that gives you something to go off on your paper or in your book or whatever you're using. Now, on Teams, there's this and the pictures. And what you can do if you would like to is cut out the pictures, stick them into place, and then I want you to write me a little sentence underneath about what's happening in each picture. A little bit like how when I was showing you the picture, I was talking. So what you can be doing is cutting out your picture, sticking it in place, and then, like I did, talk about what's happening and come up with a little sentence. Okay, if you can't print out anything today, that's absolutely fine, because you can still order the events in the story by looking at the pictures on the next page. You can pause the video, have the pictures up on the screen, and then you can put them into order. Okay, and remember, our main job today is to sequence the events, so it's to think about all of the things that happen from the beginning right the way through to the end. Here are the pictures, so if you can't print them out, that's totally fine. You might want to pause the video on this page, and you can have this on your device as you're drawing and ordering. Okay? Well done, boys and girls. Beautiful listening, and I can't wait to see your creations. If you are choosing to just draw the pictures rather than cutting and sticking, I can't wait to see how creative you get with those too. Please remember, I'm looking for a sentence about each picture. It could be a short sentence, something short and simple to summarise what's happening in each one.